With us today for this session, I have two support folks. Devin, if you want to say hello.
Hi
Devin
there.
is hard at work.
Hi, I'm Devin Hess with the UC Berkeley History Project.
And also supporting us today will be Stacy. And Stacy, well, if you want to go ahead and say hello.
Hi, I'm Stacy Farrell. I'm at Sanderfell High and working on a 9th grade ethnic studies course with Jason.
Right, and so Stacy has actually worked with me in the same session that you're all sitting with today and a similar session in the past. So she'll be bringing her knowledge and that experience of having done some of these steps that we'll engage with today already. And a little bit later on, when we do some breakout work, Stacy will be providing some support with those individual breakout groups, as will I, to support and make sure that things are running smoothly and helping out if there's any questions. So just letting you know that that's what we have in store for today, and those are our support folks. And before we get too deep into our work, just a couple of things in terms of like house cleaning or getting our space in order before we move forward. We have a problem that many of you have already experienced where you're coming into the room and your name has been changed when you come in to Jason Muniz. That's likely happened because you used the link that I provided in the email that was sent out, which little known to us until this point, that will change your name to my name when you enter the space. So what that means for you is when you're entering the room and you see that your name isn't there, it's likely because it's listed as me, Jason Muniz. So please go ahead and click that participants button like you see a picture of in the corner of the screen. Find that at the bottom bar of your Zoom set, and it'll list out the participants on one side on a panel on the right. And just find your icon. It should be the one that's after mine and Devin's because we're the hosts. And if you click that more button, it'll let you rename. Now, when you do rename, please see to it that you list your grade and then a dash and then your name, because later on we're going to sort and hopefully we can put you into breakout groups according to your grade level. Try to avoid doing grade span. Instead, just choose a specific grade that you want to engage with. So if you teach, 9 through 12 or a number of different grades, let's say, just choose one particular grade to focus on. So that way, when we're grouping, we can be seated or put together with other people working on that same grade level. All right, hopefully that makes sense. All right, and one last thing before we get started. I did want to take an opportunity today to sort of remind folks, in the first session, there were some folks who were interested in kind of doing some collaborative groups outside of our session today. And so one thing that I provided for the integrating ethnic studies folks, but I think should definitely be extended to everyone, is a form where if you submit some basic information about wanting to collaborate, use that form, and Devin can share that form in the chat right now. That form that you fill out will allow me to sort of group you together with other teachers and other educators at the same grade level or grade span that will work. And by email, I'll do a little e-introduction, and hopefully we'll get together and move forward with some of the work that we're doing together in that space. Once I've made those connections for everyone, I'll do all the work of putting together whomever has an affinity with whatever else that someone else needs. So be it grades, be it any other affinity group that you want to sort of collaborate with in this work, please make that apparent on the form, and I'll do my best to pair you with someone else so long as you provide the information and the okay to do that. Also, you'll see the image for the Facebook group. The reason I provided that again is for teachers in ethnic studies to get support from a larger network. So not just me or not just the people that are in this room. There's a lot of great educators who have been doing this work for a number of years, others who are just starting that also would like a little bit more support or feedback from people going through similar experiences. So again, part of this is sort of developing our network for ethnic studies educators, and that ethnic studies Facebook group is there for that. I know not everybody loves Facebook, but there's the link that Devin's going to paste into the chat as well. And it's just another resource, even if you don't necessarily like what they do with your information or anything else that Facebook does. I get that. But we like to have it as a resource just to keep teachers in communication and making sure that we're getting support during what's taking on a difficult task of creating or developing a course. Devin also has something that he wanted to share with you. So Devin, if you want to take the floor and share something with our group as well.
Sure. I work with two districts, two county offices in San Mateo and down in Santa Clara County, and we've been doing teacher pilot groups around integrated action civics, bringing the action civics work and the civic engagement into the history social studies classroom, integrating the concepts and the skills of doing, of engaging with the contemporary world into the classroom itself. And we're going to be doing an introduction, a 3-day morning series in August 3rd, 4th, and 5th for a couple hours each morning to introduce you to some of these concepts, how to have kids sort of really think about power, how to have them think about stakeholders, think about how to analyze a situation, and doing that both in the historical context of your course, but also taking those same skills as they practice it in historical context and be able to apply it to contemporary issues that they feel strongly about. And I'll put that link in here. You're welcome to sign up for that. It's a free series that I'm hosting with Olivia Santillan from the Santa Clara County Office of Ed. So I'm putting that in the chat right as well. So I hope to see you all there.
And I think everybody can see how that would make a connection to some of the work that we're doing in developing ethnic studies courses. So please, if it makes sense for you to consider that, definitely give it a shot. Devin's obviously one of our colleagues, and it'd be very valuable to your work, even in developing an ethnic studies course, I think. So there's that. One last thing I wanted to make sure that y'all folks are aware of. We're now going to sort of get started with today's session. Today's session, we'll start off by looking at the language of ethnic studies and some of the things that are challenges or things that you need to consider when working with the language that's involved with an ethnic studies course. Before we do, just a heads up that today's session will be more with some more productive for you all. And there'll be a little bit less of me talking and more of folks collaborating and sort of working with each other to sort of develop some materials for your course. So sort of prepare for the fact that we'll be interacting a bit more with our peers. So the language of ethnic studies. For those of us who have engaged with ethnic studies courses before or seen some of the work in the past, the language that's in ethnic studies courses a lot of times is very unfamiliar to teachers and is very unfamiliar to many of our students. And so when we start to engage with some of the language that comprises an ethnic studies course, it's going to seem pretty foreign. I'm not sure how many of you were able to look over the model curriculum appendices that I provided the link at the end of Monday's session. But when you link to those and you read some of those syllabi, some of the language in the syllabi and some of the language in that model curriculum is challenging. As a matter of fact, I recently found an article that described it as jargon-filled and all too PC. In specific regards to the replacing of E in history, or turning it to herstory with an X. There's a lot of different connotations and spellings with a lot of reasons why. And we can go into all those at some point if you'd like in discussions. But one thing that you should be aware of is that a lot of the materials that you'll be engaging with in ethnic studies do sound different, and to some people's eyes are pretty filled with jargon. That said, I want us to sort of engage with some of that language, see what we understand, see what we need a little help understanding before we move too far in our work today. So what will happen now is that Devin will place a link inside of the chat that I'd like for you all to click on. When you do, it's going to give you a screen like the one that you see in front of you that allows you to copy a document. All right, that link should be coming in there right now. Now, once you've got that link, it should, once you've made your copy, obviously click the blue make a copy link. Once you've got your copy, you should see a screen displayed that looks like this one. This is what I'm calling an ethnic studies concept ranking scheme page. And what I'd like for you to do when you engage with this particular page you have a copy of that you can type into is, I know it's a little bit longer and we'll have some time. I want you to read each term on this list and then rank them on the scale according to which you think would be most valuable when teaching ethnic studies courses in your community. 5 being very important, down to 1, which is not really relevant for my school community. These vocabulary terms were created by another one of my colleagues, Cindy Mata, who works in the UCLA History Geography Project. And she actually made these great flashcards. So if you want to incorporate that sort of thing into your instruction, there's a link to her versions of the flashcards you can print out. But these are actually definitions, the terms of definitions, and then a space to list the ranking. And I like for us to spend the next, let's say, 7 or 8 minutes. I'm gonna give you some time to do it because it's a big list, to sort of just look over the definition and then make a quick assessment about whether or not you think this is very important, just important, good to know, not necessary or not that valuable for your instruction, or 1, not at all relevant. So if you would mind, take the next, let's say 7 minutes right now to that, and I'll let you know when we're moving on to the next move. All right. Thanks, everyone. Well, if you have any questions, shoot them into chat, and I'll try to respond as best I can. All right, folks. Thank you for your time and attention to that list and those rankings. If you haven't finished that entire list all the way, of course, there'll be some time to do that as we're generating some of our next moves. Now we're going to move on from our engaging with some of the vocabulary ethnic studies to use what we've learned or what we've re-engaged with by looking at that vocabulary to generate some themes for our ethnic studies course. Now, part of the process that we went through in my school district when we developed our ethnic studies course was to really think about and spend some really intense time generating ideas about what would specifically work for our school community, knowing that school communities, even within a district, can vary. And so giving a lot of attention to what the needs of our school was as opposed to other schools, and seeing what we can do to generate content for our courses that responded to that. Today, what we'll do in terms of that is spend some time thinking about the schools that we teach at and how the words and the language that you just engaged with will apply to those schools in particular in order to generate some themes for instruction. At the bottom of the page that I just had you all engage with, there should have been a link that says click here or something like that. Click here for session 2 resources. And if you haven't found that, let me see if I can actually put my screen as opposed to this heading page. Let's see if I can find that for you. All right, well, if you click the page, click the link that says click here for session 2 resources, what you should see on your screen is a page that looks like this. Integrating Ethnic Studies, session 2, July 15th. If you can't find that link at the bottom of the page, Devin, if you wouldn't mind putting the link to this specific page that allows you to make a copy to get to this page, putting that in chat. So that way folks can all see what I'm looking at on the screen right now.
This is the session 2 resources I just put in there, I think.
Yeah, session 2 resources. And if you clicked on that link, you should see a screen that looks like the one that I'm displaying right now for everyone to have a look at. Is that correct? Okay. So what I'd like for us to do right now is take some time and scan the document that you were looking at. Actually, let me pull this back up. I do have some detailed instructions about what to do here. Let's do that. Okay. So in the document that you've opened up, your copy of the document, you should see that in the first section, you'll see a space like the one that's on the screen. And your first task today is to work out, around a little bit of work around generating themes to identify which of the terms that you just worked with that you rated as most valuable to instruction to ethnic studies courses. You would, like sort of identify them and sort of place them in the boxes as you see on the screen. So what I'm hoping that you do is like the ones that you listed on your entire ranking as level 5 or level 4 terms, I want you to identify those. So kind of toggle back and forth between this new document and the one that you were just working in. And take those level 5 and level 4 terms, the ones you rank the highest, and sort of place them into these boxes of very important for my school community or important for my school community. And copy those or just type them out into these spaces here so that we compile a list of all the ones that you may have considered very important or really important or straight up important for your school community. And we're going to spend some time doing that, and I'm going to give you some time to do that work in just a little bit. Once you have collected all those 4s and 5s, and if you don't have too many 4s and 5s, then sink down to 3s as well and sort of place them perhaps in the 4 box. But once you have compiled a couple of lists of the very important and important terms from that concept ranking, then I want you to move down to the next space that's just below, and it's sort of mirrored what you see on my screen as it's on your page. And I want you to sort those concepts into different groups according to the connections that you see between them. I'm going to ask that you push your thinking a little bit further and group them according to whatever rationale makes sense to you. If the terms connect, place them in unique groups. And yes, it's okay to use terms in more than one group, but the group should have something in common that you can name. So for example, if you're doing it correctly, let's see with your 4s and 5s, eventually what you're doing is sorting the ones that you think sort of make sense to put together. So I did, as an example, these, but your groups will look different depending on what your rationale is, what your thinking is, and what the needs of your school community is, because those will be different and you will have ranked things differently in your 5 and 4s. The one thing that I don't want you to do is to write anything in those spaces at the bottom of that little graphic organizer that's on your form. We're going to do something with those in a little bit, but for right now, just collect all your 4s and 5s and sort them into sort of common groups according to connection that you perceive between them, right? I'll leave that direction screen up on the screen for you all, but if you wouldn't mind working on that offline a little bit, or just while I shut off my microphone for a little bit, I'll give you about 5 minutes to do that, and then I'll let you know what the next move is. Oh, and if you have any questions, please put them into chat. I'll be doing my best to respond to them as I can. Okay. So folks, thank you so much for participating in that. And let me fill you in on what the idea is. So the reason I ask you to do that is sort of identify some specific terms that we can group together in the hopes of developing, I guess, the beginning stages of themes for units and themes that will comprise the entire course and it's all of its scope. So what I'm hoping that you'll do is kind of focus in first at least one of those group of concepts. And as you look at that group of concepts, I want you to identify a common idea or connection between them. Really, what was the justification that you made for grouping those particular pieces of vocabulary, those concepts together? So focus on one of your groups of concepts now and ask, what was it about those terms that inspired you to group them together? And then using that connection that you've made, create a heading or a main idea for that group. And it could be a phrase, a word, or two, whatever works to describe the connection. And write that in the space that's at the bottom. And then repeat those for the other columns. So again, for as many columns as you have generated of groupings of vocabulary terms, kind of name what it was that was the connection to your mind, to your thinking that made you put them together, and name that at the bottom. And even if it isn't like the most artistic name for whatever it is that you thought of to connect them, just put that there together for now as a placeholder, or just some kind of phrase or sentence or word that sort of binds them together as concepts, and then do that for each of those columns. And I'll give us like 2 or 3 minutes to name those out as well before I show what we're working on, because right now what that move really is the beginning thoughts about developing content or developing ideas for units. Okay. So hopefully you've got some headings or main ideas for each of your groups of concepts. And these were some of the concepts that you determined were the most valuable for instruction in your specific school site. So you've already filtered them by, all right, these are terms, these are pieces of language, these are concepts that I think that my students would gain a lot from understanding. And now that you've grouped those different concepts into sort of groups that make sense to pair them with other pieces of language, those particular pieces of language that you've grouped them together are the sort of the fundamental ideas that will go into specific units that you'll cultivate. But of course, that's not the end all be all. There's a lot of different ideas that can also be included in the lists that you've generated so far, ideas and concepts that weren't on my page of different kinds of ethnic studies of vocabulary. So this is what I'd like for us to do with the next move. We're going to spend a little time comparing some notes on what you've developed in your specific list and your specific grouping versus some others of who are your peers. So we're going to do that in breakout rooms, and let me explain a little bit about what the structure is going to look like for this process. So when Devin and I send you to these breakout rooms, we're going to ask that folks in those 4-person groups, 4 or 5-person groups, I forget, we said 4-person, start to respond. And the first person whose name begins first in alphabetical order, I'm going to ask you politely to take on the first role. Sorry for all my A's. But for when you arrive in those groups, please then go ahead and take on these tasks. First, I want you to choose one of your columns and share the name of one of your headings / main idea columns. So I named these particular concept groupings this. Then once you've shared that, name out what the concepts were that you listed, then form how you named that heading. So if you went back to my example, I named it, understanding identity, all the different concepts that led me to think of that grouping title. I want you to name to all the concepts that led to your thinking and understanding of naming it such. Now, once you've done that, the work is really on your peers that are in that group, because I'm asking the peers to suggest other concepts or other language or other things that might be included in a unit or in a topic, whatever, I guess, format you choose, that would be included in that particular session. So if you want to generate some more ideas about what could be included in, unit 1 or unit 2 named this, where I'm already teaching these concepts, the peers in your group will sort of spitball and give other ideas. Oh, what should also go in your identity unit is talk about race, or talking about gender identity, or talking about whatever else seems germane to whatever it is that you named as your heading or main idea. And at that point, as the person who suggested your heading or main idea first, I'm hoping that you take notes and sort of add to what's being generated already into with the ideas that your peers contributed to. Now, after 60 to 90 seconds, then go ahead and switch to another member of your group, so that way each person can choose one of their columns and sort of get that feedback from their peers in that group. What will happen on our end is that if there are any problems, not really sure how to do that, myself and Stacy, who introduced herself at the beginning of the session, will be automatically put into a couple of breakout rooms. But if you feel that you need a little bit more support, or there's something that you don't understand, inside the chat, go ahead and message Devin Hess, and his name is on the list there, and let him know that you'd like some help in your particular group, in your breakout room. At that point, he will move us from whatever breakout room that we're in to support you in your breakout room, and hopefully help you move past whatever snafus, whatever misunderstandings, or whatever support that you need, right? So again, going to the breakout rooms, each person sharing their ideas, others giving feedback about those ideas, about the groupings, and everyone taking turns to do so. If you have any questions about that, let Devin or I know, but as soon as I give him the okay, we're gonna go ahead into those breakout rooms. So Devin, if you want to send us to those rooms, thank you very much. And we'll be in those rooms for about 7-8 minutes. For participating. Our recording is coming back on, so thank you so much. So now our recording is coming back on. Again, if you didn't want to be recorded, it's a good time now to go ahead and change that on your screen. So take off your camera, so that way it won't have continue to re-record it and have your wonderful faces there. So that's fine. One thing I will ask is to return yourselves back to mute if you aren't there already. It looks like most of us are, so that's great. And we'll be continuing on in just a moment. So before I move on to our next section of our work today, just if anybody wants to take advantage of that chat area right now and tell me what was that experience like of sharing your ideas for what a potential unit might be and what would be composed in, what would comprise it, and getting some feedback from some of your peers about, hey, you might want to throw this in there, or have you thought about this? Just as opposed to like naming out the specifics of your course or the column that you populated, what was your take in that whole interaction and that whole discourse with peers in general? If you want to type out some of your responses in the chat, I'd appreciate it. Many of the main ideas were similar. Sure, it was great. Good to hear that. Excited to see so much agreement. Were there any folks who had like some very radical different ideas that like, oh, I hadn't even thought about that a teacher sort of made a connection that I wasn't necessarily sort of coming to on my own understanding of this list? I'm hoping to see if anybody had that idea or that experience. Part of the balance between hope, truth, and trauma. Yeah.
Jason,
Yeah.
I actually want to verbalize something if I could.
Sure.
Just one participant in my breakout room, or our breakout room rather, just mentioned someone, Rachel Cargill, and just the phrase, the great unlearn.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was a really interesting phrase about how to unlearn something. So I just really appreciate my group. Some really smart people. So just, wow.
Yeah,
I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And again, that's why I always advocate for and make a big point of making sure that we have a way to connect with each other and create these networks of teachers, because there's a lot of folks who are in this space right now who can be supportive, or just as far as idea partners, right? And so like what Brian was vocalizing, that just saying things out loud and hearing feedback from folks is what's valuable. So any of those resources that I presented to kind of keep the conversations going, absolutely take advantage of it, because this is really why we're doing this, to create a strong network so we can all improve our ethnic studies practices, whether it's an integration of a course with ethnic studies or just a standalone course at different levels. A lot of great ideas that are being verbalized in there. And even if they're all similar, perhaps that's a good thing. Perhaps that we want to sort of push our thinking further. That's also good. And just remember that this work is not complete. Obviously, the more we think about what could be included on those lists, including language that wasn't on those lists at all. I have developed a work in progress sort of glossary vocabulary of ethnic studies terms. I'll make sure that's shared with you all. It's in the resources for today's session as well. So if you scroll down way at the bottom, it should be there as far as like a glossary. You can get wrapped up and lost in that. So I wouldn't advise looking too much in it right now, because it'll it's a rabbit hole to fall down. But absolutely sort of use different language, others that your peers have sort of suggested, and sort of populate those lists. And we'll do a little bit more of that later on, to sort of expand our thinking about what could be inside of in each unique units. And thank you, it looks like Kat, for sharing that Rachel Cargill link. So again, want to grab that and save that. I know I will. I save all of our chats, and I'll make sure that those are available resources for us going forward. Okay, so let's move on for right now and start talking about another part of construction of our courses that I wanted us to start to engage with today. It is really just a starting to engage sort of deal, because what we're looking at now is kind of thinking about and conceptualizing the entire span of our course in terms of developing an inquiry question for that. A lot of the work that we do at the UC Berkeley History Social Science Project is supporting teachers in the overall design of their course. And one thing that we advocate for entirely is to develop your courses, or to reimagine existing courses in terms of an inquiry question that sort of governs the idea of the course over the entire school year. And those course level sort of governing questions will dictate, what we're thinking about each individual units, and thereby influencing what we think about each individual assignments or content that we develop for the course in general. I'd like to show you a model of what I'm talking about there, and maybe that'll make a little bit more sense. So when we think about inquiry-driven course design, the students seek to answer like a bigger course level question, a course level inquiry question, by exploring the answers to other questions that focus a response to that bigger question. So again, each question that's a course level, high level question, it's the kind of thing that you might put in your classroom. If we have classrooms again sometime soon. If you put inside your classroom, like on the wall, for students to sort of refer to all year long, we're going to be interrogating in some ways this question. And unit 1 is going to help us answer this question in this way. Unit 2 is going to help us answer this bigger question in this way, and so on. And so that way, over the course of the year, each one of those units will focus instruction in the class to have a better understanding of that bigger, higher level question that we're looking at the entire year. This course level question, that model that you see there, it kind of actually works as well if you think about it. Instead of the arrows just going up, they also go up and down. Whereas the everyday content that you're providing in class will support students in answering a unit-focused question and generating an answer to a unit-focused question. And then the answer that they generate for that unit-focused question would again help them answer the bigger course-level question. So it pays to have a good overarching course level question that will inform what the students will study over the rest of the year, and how they will study it, and what content that you're going to provide to them that will lend towards them answering that question in a thoughtful way. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you have any questions about the sort of inquiry-driven course design model, please follow up with me. I'd be happy to expand on that further. My partner, Devin, is much more of an expert than I am, because he's been providing this support a little bit longer, but the thinking is right along those lines. And obviously, there's a little bit more elaborate to it than what I'm stating right now. But what I'm hoping that we'll do today with the thematic information that you sort of identified in those columns on that worksheet that we've done, sort of use that to inform what we could create as a course level question that would help us develop our ethnic studies courses. Right? So let's spend a little time thinking about and brainstorming what a course level question that would govern our entire ethnic studies course would look like. And then we'll hopefully get some time to generate what it would be like to actually produce a real working model as we go on today. So let's spend a little time then thinking about, what really a good course level question might look like. And good course level questions kind of raise bigger overarching thematic ideas for students to respond to, and for students to have generated a response to, sorry. So effective course level questions do some of these things. They absolutely address important overarching themes, concepts, and pressing issues within the course. And that's why I was asking you as your first move today to sort of name some of the ideas that can construct a potential theme or 2 or 3 or 4 for your course. Because if you have those themes sort of in mind and how they're grouped and some of the bigger ideas, then we can look at what ties them all together. What unifies all the different themes and named sort of concepts that you've put into those different categories. If we could think of a question that sort of unifies us to have an understanding of all of those, then we'll have comprised a pretty good course level question that directs our students to address and to interrogate some big questions and big ideas, right? So all those pressing issues and things that you named as like 4 and 5, yes, very important. Those are the kind of things that a course level question that's a good and effective one will help them to understand. Again, we want to make sure that our course level questions extend over multiple units of study. If you can answer the big idea question at the end of unit 1, you probably need to have a better course level question, or you probably just created a really good unit question. If the course level question it can only be can be answered within like the first few weeks of study. So we want to make it extend over the course of the year and have students use a lot of different things they learned over the course of our year or semester to construct an answer to that bigger question. Another thing that you want to consider is that your question as you construct it should stimulate ongoing thinking and questioning. These course level questions should generate other potential questions. But what about this? And what if you consider this? Should be other ways to think about how we're constructing the course level question in terms of results. The students will have a well thought out constructed answer, but also there's space to push their thinking. Here's my answer to this course level question. However, if we looked at it this way, here's another way to sort of interpret the question that's been presented to us as a course level question. So there's a lot of ongoing thinking and questioning, and it's the kind of question that you're developing right now that when students look back on your course 2 years from now, 5 years from now, if they could remember what they were taught, oh, Mr. or Miss So-and-so taught us this when I learned ethnic studies that year. So whatever it is they walk away with, the enduring understanding is what we're hoping is generated from the big idea course level question. These sort of thinkings apply to effective course level questions in any subject matter, really. It doesn't even have to be social sciences. These are sort of things that sort of endure across all disciplines. But specific to ethnic studies, I think when we develop a course level question for ethnic studies, one thing that we want to do is to challenge students to accomplish the learning goals expressed in the course definition that we set up. Now, if you remember in our very first session, if we were all there for that first session and mentioned it in yesterday's session 2 for integration of ethnic studies, I asked folks to sort of engage with a course definition that sort of sets the bar for what we understand ethnic studies to be in our specific school district. And the big idea course level question that you generate should have that definition of ethnic studies that you have been developing in mind on some level. To model it again, I'm going to remind folks of what the I guess, definition for ethnic studies was in the school district that I came up in, Oakland Unified. And for us, that definition of ethnic studies was this one. Ethnic studies are content pedagogy that humanizes and empowers all people by honoring histories and cultures of historically marginalized groups, by employing multiple disciplines and perspectives to critically analyze systems of oppression. That's a mouthful. And by promoting action and solidarity with others to transform students' lives and communities. My course level question that I developed when I was still teaching ethnic studies last year was in part informed by this definition and this goal for what we had instructionally for ethnic studies in Oakland. Your school community is absolutely going to be different if it's not Oakland, and even within Oakland, it's going to be different. So think about like your school community and what ethnic studies is defined going to be defined as in your school community, and use that to sort of shape some of the things you think big picture about in terms of a course level question. Since this is our definition, or was my definition for ethnic studies in my district, what that inspired out of me was to create a course, and don't worry about this next screen, it's a lot at first, was a course that looked like this. This is the course map for the 9th grade ethnic studies class that I taught at Fremont High School in Oakland, California. Again, a very, very specific context. But when I look back at what my school district was asking me to consider when defining ethnic studies, it made sense for my specific school community to have conversations about identity, power, privilege, an understanding of oppression, and an understanding of resistance and agency. We're in Oakland. So a lot of those things were very relevant for the kids that were sitting in front of me and all the different identities and worldviews that they brought into our space. So with all those things considered, the course inquiry question, and you see it towards the top line on the screen there that I developed, and it's also in the middle bubble, was how does oppression based on one's identity inspire resistance? And you can see that the question that I developed challenge my students to have to engage with the concepts of what's identity. To answer that question, I have to have an understanding on a number of levels of what identity is, right? So I need to also understand, to be able to answer that question, what power and privilege is, in order to understand what oppression is. So identity and oppression are sort of embedded into the first part of that question. In order to be able to understand how does oppression based on one's identity inspire anything, I need to know identity, I need to know oppression, and what is the root of oppression. And then that last part, to inspire resistance, well, then I need to make sure that my students walk away with understanding of resistance and agency in order for them to walk away with being able to answer, how does oppression based on your identity inspire resistance? Well, what is resistance? What does that look like? How might that be inspired in different forms by power, privilege, oppression, and identity? So again, that's the march through an idea that is all inspired by a course level question that's well thought out. Again, looking back, I would change a lot of the things, even about my course level question. So it's important now to think about the fact that this is a work in progress. It's something that you revise from year to year. It's something that you may revise even over the course or during the school year to tinker with your course level questions, even your unit level questions, and certainly the inquiry that you on a day-to-day basis. I've made this particular course outline map available in our resources. But again, whenever you refer to this, if you refer to this, keep in mind that this is just an example of one particular circumstance that I engage with. What I'm going to ask you folks to do right now is take a few moments and think about your school context and your school community. And on that resource page, there is a space where I ask you to come up with a draft. Just a draft of what comes to your mind in terms of a course level question right now. So I want you to engage with that part of your worksheet, the resource page, and then start to spitball even in the next 5-10 minutes. What are some ideas you can generate about what is a big course level question that I can use to serve my school community in this ethnic studies course? Again, I've provided in that same space where the draft box is for you to type into, right below it, those models that I've shown you.
Looks like
I lost you guys for a second.
Oh,
Nope,
there
I'm
you're
back.
back. Okay.
I'm back. Sorry about that. But we're about to go breaking out into our groups anyway, so sorry about that weird distraction there. However, when we go out to before we go to breakout groups, I want us to have some time to sort of generate some ideas on that actual form. So I'll give the folks in attendance here, I know it's nowhere near enough time. Let's be about 6 or 7 minutes right now to sort of some initial thoughts on a draft of a course level question, considering some of the things that we've looked at today and thematically and our needs of our school community. I will stop talking now and give you folks some time to work on that, and we'll come back together in 6 minutes. All right, folks, thank you for your work there. And I know that some of the time on that is not satisfying because we can spend a lot of time thinking about what our course level questions are. And the one thing that I would ask of you after this session is, if you're coming to our third session, the one that's going to be on Friday, to spend some time thinking about that course level question and refining it as best you can. But let's spend a little time that we still have together thinking about how to refine it with some feedback from our peers right now. So what I'm hoping that we'll do in this next section is we're going to go to breakout rooms once again. And once again, in 4-person groups. I think they should be the same group. I'm not sure if that's going to hold, but if they are, that's great. If not, that's fine too. But again, starting in alphabetical order, please do the following steps. Briefly describe the context of your school or district. For example, for me, Oakland Unified, in East Oakland, a lot of students that are in different economic circumstances that are not the best, but a lot of communities that are very diverse within our school system and our school in particular. Right? Give a description of your context. Again, share your draft of a course inquiry. And my course level question, everybody, that I come up with was, how does oppression based on one's identity inspire resistance? With that piece of information, or those pieces of information shared, at this point, I'd like for the peers in each group to provide feedback or ask questions about that draft. Have you considered this? Or what kind of units are going to be developed when you have a course level question like that? Or how do you imagine students will be able to answer that question? Or just some kinds of feedback that you might want to engage with when you're listening to folks draft about course level questions. And again, as you as a person who gave that information up, I'm hoping that you'll be able to take some notes and take some of that feedback to heart and use it right then. And then after 2 minutes, we're going to ask you to switch to another member of your group. and then hopefully repeat that cycle so everyone gets a chance to share their information and share their feedback. Once again, as we did the first time, myself and Stacy, we're going to make ourselves available to come and be bounced around to different rooms as needed. So if you do feel the need to get feedback or some support from myself or Stacy, please message in chat Devin. You have the ability to do that and select him specifically from the chat members. And just let him know that, hey, in our group, we need a little help. And we'll be happy to come to you as soon as we can. Usually takes about 30 seconds to move from where we were to where we are needed. All right. With that said, I have us at 11:20. We'll go to like 11:28 before we come back. So time's a little tight, but hopefully we'll get it done. If there's no questions, Devin, please go ahead and send us to our breakouts. If you're anything like me, your experience just now was a little frustrating because we did not have enough time to really get into it or really spend enough time with everyone's conversations. And again, I'm sorry about that, but it does give me an opportunity to remind you all that we do have other opportunities to continue this collaboration outside this 90-minute space. But one thing I did want to get feedback from you all after those second breakout room conversations were these. Over the course of yesterday and today, if you wouldn't mind giving some response to these in chat, how is your thinking about developing an ethnic studies course, or how has it shifted over these sessions so far? And what are some next steps that you would like to engage in when we meet again or even beyond this? Because looking forward to step 3, to session 3, we will be spending a little bit more time deconstructing or hopefully developing our course level questions a little bit further, and then deconstructing that course level question to allow for us to sort of develop our units, knowing already what some of the concepts are that we want to include in those units are. So again, take a moment now, if you don't mind, and just answer one or both of those questions. How has your thinking developed as an ethnic studies? How's your thinking about developing an ethnic studies course shifted? So how has it developed? And what are some next steps that you would like to engage in? So we can sort of take those into consideration as we move forward with the work that's going to be in our next session.